Good evening. I'm Howard Homanoff, and this is Media Reporter. Thank you for joining us. My guest this evening is Bill Livek, who is the CEO of Rentrak, one of the great innovators in the space of media measurement. And tonight we're going to be talking with Bill about the role of data and the innovations going on in the world of media measurement, advertising, and technology. And Bill, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Great to have you here. So, first off, for those who don't deal with this every day, one of the big buzzwords or buzz phrases going around the media business is big data. You hear it everywhere. What does that mean when you hear it? What does it mean to you, and what kind of a role is that playing today in the media business?
Well, let me describe first what we do, and we play into that theme of big data. Rentrak precisely measures the movies and TV everywhere. And what that means to us is, this weekend, for example, the Hunger Games, the second edition, debuted around the world. And Rentrak is tapped into every place that someone can buy a movie ticket, from Sydney, Australia, to Boston, Massachusetts, to Chicago, to Beijing. So when it's still Thursday morning in Los Angeles, it's Friday afternoon in Sydney, and ticket sales start. So the studios look in real time the volume of tickets. So a movie opens in Sydney, Melbourne, Hong Kong, Beijing, Moscow, Paris, London, and by the time it opens in New York, the studios are already adjusting their television advertising for that weekend and subsequent weekends so they can be more efficient. When the studios are more efficient, they can put more money back into the product. On the television side, we measure over 100 million television sets every day, every time someone clicks to watch a primetime TV show on video on demand or a movie, and then a subset of those 100 million TV sets for all TV viewing. That granular television viewing information merged in a privacy compliant way with the products that we buy helps advertisers be more efficient. And if they're more efficient, they can lower the cost of products to consumer. The television networks can produce much better shows when there's this efficiency, and the consumer ultimately wins because there's a free flow of information or knowledge about viewership.
Do the advertisers have a sense, and there is no one-size-fits-all for advertisers, but do advertisers have a sense of really how to use this data? I mean, there's so much information out there for them. Is part of your work almost an educational one about how to use data in different ways than maybe then obviously people have used it before?
Advertisers are very smart about the availability of information about consumers. So take the automobile category. Those of us who drive cars, either own them or lease them, the auto registration information is publicly available. That information, merging it with the exact television show, allows BMW, for example, to target competitive brands when they're looking at putting their advertisements in precise TV shows. The corollary to when General Motors launched their small platform Cadillac, they can look at competitive brands and look at the precise TV show that they should be in. So advertisers are becoming very savvy.
Mm-hmm. And as you deal with this on a sort of technological basis and the marketing, what are some of the biggest challenges for you in sort of assembling this data and turning it around in a fashion that people can use?
Well, it's complicated to put together this information. It's the equivalent of 150 years ago building the Intercontinental Railroad. It's a tough job, but America grew up around it. Cities and industries that we couldn't even imagine. Similarly, in the cell business, that who could have imagined that we would have devices in our pockets that we could access information around the world at our fingertips, much less watch movies on the screen device. Now, this free flow of information has also caused a revolution that way. And it's being used in so many consumer product categories, so the economy is becoming more efficient.
And in the delivery of your products and services to the customers that you have, is it, are there kind of routine or regular or sort of the equivalent of off-the-shelf products that you can be delivering to people, or is almost everything you have to do customized or customizable?
Good question. So much of what we do is done in a factory-like environment. So over 160 television networks use Rentrak every day to look at all their TV viewing in the on-demand platform. Advertisers use us when they have a specific need, sometimes on a custom basis. There's a great example, if you're interested in the political arena, that I'll share with you.
Please do. My career began in politics, so I'm a junkie.
We all know that we just went through a little over a year ago political campaign that...
really? Did the campaign actually end?
I'm not sure.
Okay, all right.
But Rentrak was involved in that in a behind-the-scenes basis. We offered to both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, the ability to merge their specific target audience up against precise TV shows, the demographics that they were concerned with were watching. So the Obama for America campaign, as an example, had a lot of different segments of voters that had very little to do with age and their sex, and had a lot to do with attitudes of how they view America and view political candidates. And by targeting into voters that weren't necessarily their core, because they would get those anyway, like with any consumer product. If you're a loyal buyer of Buick, you probably buy it again. But if you're a swing voter, those are the ones that both Republicans and Democrats wanted to capture. By using targeting information, both parties spent about the same amount of money, but the Obama campaign, by their estimation, was about 20% more efficient in reaching the target voter with using big data, if you would. So big data not only helps us sell more cars in our economy, which allows more jobs to happen, not only construction of those cars, but the whole marketing of it and maintenance of a car. It also helps politicians get elected or reelected.
You raise it, it's an interesting example, the political one, because there was a lot of publicity around this, the fact that the Republicans, the Romney campaign, seemed to be well behind the Obama campaign in, not necessarily with respect to the Rentrak data, but more broadly in terms of kind of its approach to technology and polling and some of the more, the newer predictive elements of the business. What are those things that you have to have as your customer? What are the kinds of things that you've really got to be good at to be able to effectively use the products and services that are out there, the innovations?
Well, Obama had a head start because the Democrats knew who their candidate was going to be in advance, so they could get their arsenal ready, if you would, on what they were going to do. The Republicans clearly had to go through primaries and a convention, so they had a late start. This time around, in the elections that just happened, both parties were utilizing Rentrak, and they're becoming more efficient. Similarly, in a way that John Kennedy, and it's probably appropriate we chat about that for 30 seconds, that it's the 50th anniversary of his early demise, it was that he was the first presidential candidate to use modern marketing techniques to use for TV commercials and his election. And he was the first, and then all candidates adopted those modern principles. And the Obama for America campaign was the first group to use big data, and now it's just a matter of course.
Do you already see pretty quickly post-election, kind of the playing field leveling in terms of Republicans and Democrats and the use by a lot of different candidates of what's available out there?
Right. I mean, what actually happens with the use of most consumer products it creates early efficiencies, and the early adopters get all those efficiencies to their side. And then the later adopters, everyone has those efficiencies, but the market works better. The market works more fluid. And that's one of the great things about American capitalism, is that we invent ideas, consumers, certain subgroups adopt them very early, and then as it starts becoming mainstream, the economy becomes more efficient. I hate to ask you what you paid for your first cell phone in the 80s, but I bet you it was a lot more than $90.
And it was not able to fit in my pocket, I'll tell you that. So it looked more, probably looked more like what Michael Douglas used, the famous one in on the beach in Wall Street. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, we're here at Columbia University Business School, and obviously one of the great research institutions, and it sort of brings to mind, the question to me is, with all of the new sort of sources of data available, the means of mining that data, how do you think, and your background is in research, you know, to a great degree, how does the life of the researcher kind of change? And is it now much more about being a technologist, or is the value add still, you know, judgment and insight that you bring to the data?
We are awash in America, and in the world for that matter, with data, but there's still an absence of knowledge. So what we've done at Rentrak is taken a big data business and turned it into information first, and then high value knowledge. And that's the big piece, I think, where our economy is entering now. We're going from a data world where a lot of jobs have been created through an information into a knowledge-based economy. And I think the things we're going to see in the future, it will be mind-numbing, and the efficiencies that we're going to have in our economy are just going to be unbelievable.
Let's talk a little bit more about Rentrak itself and kind of the world that you're in, and you are in a space that historically has almost been defined by Nielsen ratings as a term that has almost become like Kleenex or Jell-O, and so ubiquitous, at least in the media business. How does someone who's a relatively new entrant in that world succeed when there's a company with such a sort of institutional presence?
Yeah, the analogy I'll use there, I'm going to go back to cell phones. Motorola, a Chicago-based company, dominated the invention of portable telephones, cell phones. Who would have thought this tiny little company that started in a garage called Apple could have ever dominated that space? Well, what usually happens is the dominant company at one period of time fails to innovate, and then the innovators take the market. But the market has to shift along with technology. The shift to big data has allowed the opportunity for Rentrak to build a marvelous business to measuring millions and millions of television sets, where the service that's been around for a long time measures thousands of TV, thousands versus 100 million TV sets. When you have the 100 million, you can take the demographics of the products that we buy, the cars that we drive, and merge them with the exact TV shows, with a sample as finite as you can get is male 25 to 54. So in my household, male 25-54 demographic is a family reunion.
Well, how do you, again, sort of competing in the marketplace, relatively speaking, is the big investment for somebody, for a Rentrak in technology? Is it people? Is it a means of enhancing marketing so that people understand the story that, you know, yes, not just technologically, but sort of how you use the census versus kind of sample data? And maybe the answer is all of the above, but how do you get that mix right?
It's hard. Rentrak's a company that's been around 25 years, and like Apple Computer, reinvented itself a few times. Our legacy is in the movie business, where early on, Rentrak facilitated video content the tapes that stores used to rent, like Blockbuster Video. And Rentrak was the company that facilitated that content by developing computer systems that could count the number of times a video got rented. And now today it's a DVD and video stores are passing away. But in that process, cable television afforded the consumer the ability to rent a video with video on demand. Because of the technology that Rentrak invented, we very early on figured out a way to measure cable set-top boxes. Today it's satellite and telco in any connected TV, which has afforded us a lot of learning along the way. So these businesses look easy from the surface, but they're really complicated to get built up. So we're a technology company at our roots, based in Portland, Oregon, and we didn't market to.
So you're more fun than most people.
I don't know about that, but Portland's a great place to be.
Yeah.
New York's also an equivalent great place to be too.
So you mentioned the motion picture business, obviously sort of at that heart of what, especially the early days of Rentrak. You talk about businesses facing tremendous challenges today, and you, I know, have innovated in terms specifically around some of the data that and the products you're providing in that industry. Talk a little bit about that and really how that, and what your perspective on that business, which in a lot of respects, people look at and really see it potentially as so tremendously challenged.
Well, let's take the two pieces, measuring the movies. I think the movie business, the best days are ahead of it. And it's in large part because the global consumer, particularly in China, is opening up. The new president of China was educated here in the United States in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And he returns to China and takes his political position with a bias to understand American, and that our films are a reflection of culture, and culture in a way to be entertained and communicate. So the censorship rules in China are melting down. And at the same time, China is trying to deal with the piracy issue of stolen movies. So they're building movie theaters and opening them at a clip of 1 a day, megaplexes. So you now look at movies, half of the earnings come from outside the United States. Hunger Games, which I mentioned earlier, it opened up in the opening weekend with about $360 million of ticket sales. Half of that was outside the US. 5 years ago, that was not the case. Everything has changed.
And how about your business and people in the, maybe more broadly in the measurement business, how important is the international marketplace to you, either both today and the future?
Well, on the movie side, it's definitely global, and we're a global company measuring every inch of the world. In television, we look at it more from a United States basis. Our technology is more mature in what the consumers are, how we're viewing TV on many different platforms, and advertisers are more sophisticated. No place on earth is there a country that's as multicultural, multiracial, and multi-lifestyle as America. This melting pot that we all love and live in is a complicated world to market in. So we need tools that can pull out niches and targets that are very important to advertisers.
And how do you think advertisers are, how do you see them in the perspective they have of the traditional television business? I mean, that is, start domestically, of course, which is the 30-second spot and the DVR, et cetera, changing so much in terms of the last 10 plus years. Where do you see the, sit in the advertiser chair for a second, and what are those clients kind of telling you? What do you see?
Well, it's TV everywhere, and it's over a long period of time. So I think there was a seminal moment a couple of years ago when Comcast bought the NBC television company. And all of a sudden they started to move their primetime schedule or make it available in on demand right after it aired live. And what that had a tendency to do was educate the consumer to use a piece of technology that was in their home, video on demand. All the networks react it, and they have their primetime schedules in video on demand. So we go to work in the morning and we ask our friends, hey, what'd you do last night? And if today's a Tuesday, Monday night they're watching TV, someone may say, hey, I was watching Two Broke Girls. Oh, what's that about? I've never seen it. It's about these two attractive young women live in Brooklyn and Williamsburg, and one was the daughter of a wealthy guy who had serious legal trouble, and the other is a downtrodden girl from Brooklyn. They meet in the most unlikely circumstance. It's funny, you have to watch it. It's too complicated to explain.
This is not a product placement, I just want to point out, by CBS here. You haven't been paid anything to help promote
I
the
could
show.
talk about Sleepy Hollow.
It's just a genuine appreciation. Yeah.
It's an appreciation of the humor that is on Monday night, but I could be talking about The Voice on NBC, Dancing with Stars on ABC, or Sleepy Hollow on Monday night. So for the sake of brevity, I focused on comedy. But the point is, the trend that we see, consumers are now watching more and more TV, prime time on demand and not live. Now the opportunity there for the advertisers are that if you're building brand over the course of a month, people sit down within a series that they didn't watch when it started and can start from the beginning show and watch 3 or 4 episodes at the same time. In the technology of on demand, most of the networks are disabling fast forward, so the commercials must be viewed. It appears the consumer looks at that as a reasonable trade-off for convenience, so you don't have to set your DVR.
Do you think that that is going to hold that kind of disabling of fast forward, and is that a growth opportunity, especially around advertising, when the consumer increasingly does have options like Netflix and Hulu, even Aereo, which obviously does have the commercials, but especially a Netflix, the Amazon Video, where there is no advertising, people are paying for it, but how does video on demand compete against no advertising?
Well, it competes with the great shows. TV at its core is social. We watch TV shows because our friends watch them, as in my example. It's oftentimes that's how we discover shows, and we go see movies because our friends tell us that we should see a movie. There's a movie that just started to debut and is going to debut in wide scale, 12 Years a Slave. And the word of mouth on that movie has been incredible. And people tell people what they did on Saturday night, and went to a movie and say, you have to see this movie. So I think the best days for TV producers, whether it's for shows or movies, are ahead of it, and the best days for marketers are ahead of it, because all these different platforms and different fractionalization gives more opportunities to advertisers to be more precise. And if they're more precise, they're arguably spending their marketing dollars more precisely, saving money that they can reinvest back in the company. So these are great days.
How about the content of motion pictures, television programs going forward? Do you expect that what people watch to change a lot as a result of the greater proliferation of on-demand and other options?
I think we're going to have better and better and better quality TV shows, not just because of the technology in the United States, but because there's additional markets around the world. That India is a market where US TV shows play very well. All around the developing world, there's new markets. I mentioned China on the movie side, but also for the TV shows. So it becomes a lot easier to spend many millions of dollars when you have additional revenue opportunities, not just ad-based in the US, but selling your content around the world.
Bill, in a lot of conversations that I'm in, and I suspect you too, around the media business, the 800-pound gorillas that tend to be thrown around in conversation certainly are Google and Amazon, in a world of, especially around advertising and data, e-commerce. Are those companies on your radar screen? Are they a concern about potentially being dominant players in what you do, or is there enough there enough innovation and opportunity around for the non-Google, non-Amazon players?
Yeah, good question. Google and Amazon have great companies, but let's not forget that success in a digital world can sometimes be fleeting, and I do not believe that there will be one or two companies that dominate. I believe the consumer will keep galvanizing around many different choices. And remember, the barriers of entry keep getting lowered with technology. So what will be the next great Google? I have no idea, but certainly will be there. It wasn't that many years ago we thought AOL or CompuServe would dominate the internet, and clearly they didn't.
What are some of the other innovations that you're excited about? And I won't limit it to television, but that more broadly in the media world today, whether it's technological, content, applications, what do you see that may be directly relevant to your business or maybe not, but that sort of gets you energized?
I get energized with the consumer being able to find something that they get excited about on television with all the different platforms, and they can find it. It's not just that it's available. The navigation tools have become superior. You know, whether someone has AT&T UVerse, Fios, Time Warner Cable, Comcast, Dish, or DirecTV, the navigational systems are getting better and better. And some of these innovative companies are developing navigational tools with our voice. It's pretty unbelievable. So the platforms that the consumer has available are exciting, and the content keeps getting better and better and better.
Bill, Rentrak is in business with so many major distributors of content, cable operators, you know, that are that from whom you get data, who undoubtedly use that data. What's your perspective on the cable business, or maybe more broadly the multi-channel video provider business, and where that's headed?
I think that business has many years to go. The cable, telco, or satellite, still the most efficient way to deliver a lot of entertainment to the house. And for what a consumer gets, it's a bargain. So I'm bullish on all of the multi-channel providers.
Great. Bill, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. This has been Media Reporter from here at Columbia University School of Business. I'm Howard Homanoff. Thank you and good night.